This is entitled, Why Yaakov Only Sacrificed to the God of Yitzchak, the God of Isaac, on his way down to Egypt. So let me give you the background. It's from Midrash Rabbah, Parshat Vayigash. The background is that Yosef had revealed himself to his brothers. He sends these wagons and tells the brothers, hurry up, go home, tell my father I'm still alive. Yaakov hears the news, he's flabbergasted. He revives himself and says, I must go see my son while I still can. And he takes the whole family, and on his way down to Egypt, he stops in Beersheba. And it's a very unusual verse. It says, Vayisa Yisrael echol ashelo. He traveled with everything that he had. Vayavo Beersheba. He went to the city of Beersheba. Vayizbach zvakim lelokei avi Yitzchak, aviv Yitzchak, and he gave sacrifices to the God of his father Yitzchak. Now that's very unusual. What, Yitzchak and not Avraham? Why is he sort of targeting this to Yitzchak? So what's very interesting about this Midrash, and I don't know that I ever came across this before, but there's sort of a continuum in all commentaries on the Torah. It's used by the acronym Pardes, which stands for Pshat, which is the simple meaning of the, maybe simple literal meaning of the Torah. Remez are things that are kind of hinted at. Drush, things that are learned out and derived, like the Midrash often is. And the last one is Sod, which is some kind of secret, maybe Kabbalah, whatever you want to call it. Now here, what I'm going to be talking about is really is a Midrash, but based on the way it was taken by the Ramban, Nachmanides, who was not only a great Talmudic scholar, he was also well-versed in Kabbalah. So it's interesting, Rashi, the classic commentator Rashi, takes this verse and he quotes the Midrash Rabbah. But that's all he does is quote it. The Midrash Rabbah says something very simple. There's a law that you have to give more honor to your father than your grandfather. And that's all Rashi does to explain this very unusual verse of Yaakov giving these sacrifices only to his father Isaac. And Ramban, Nachmanides find this incredulous. He says, that's all you have to say is that, must speak. That's not enough. You haven't, there's great secret unlocked in these verses, and you have to share that. You can't just say, quote from the Midrash Rabbah and you're done. So now the Ramban starts to explain, and he gives his own background. He says that what actually was going on is that Yaakov was in terrible, terrible fear that he and his family were now going down to Egypt, and they were starting this exile of Egypt, this exile which is known from the promise made back to Avraham that it was going to be a very, very difficult years of servitude, and but they will eventually come out of it. But he had a tremendous terror. Perhaps he would have thought that the Jews somehow maybe would sink to some low level spiritually and not merit to come out. And as we know, the Jews sunk to the 49th level. There's other sources that say that the only reason Jewish people got out is because they were one day going to soon be getting the Torah, and they had a whole role of being the light to the nations and studying Torah and being immersed in Torah and teaching Torah and learning and immersing the whole world in Torah. And it was only because of that mission that they had that they got out. So all these things imply that on their own they did not merit to get out. So there was perhaps good basis for the fear that Yaakov had. So because of that, according to Ramban, he appealed to his father, to what we would call the Pachad Yitzchak, Pachad Aviv Yitzchak, the Yitzchak's fear of God. Now, of course, you have to understand something which I don't know fully, but each of the three forefathers had a certain way of connecting to God. Avram, as we know, is Chesed, which dovetails his life devoted to Chesed and doing acts of Chesed. And so that's how that was his relationship with God through Chesed. Yitzchak was more fear, Pachad Yitzchak, and it was more of him kind of not resisting and going along, like when he was himself a sacrifice, when Avram, the binding of Isaac. So Yitzchak was sort of passive and went along with it and accepted the decree that he was going to be a sacrifice. So this lack of resistance and this kind of adherence to strict law, that was Yitzchak. And Yaakov was sort of the best combination of the two, between Chesed and Din, and he was also called, Yaakov was also considered to be Emet, truth. Now if we go back and try to understand what the Ramban was saying, he seemed to imply two different directions. You could say he was appealing to the God of Yitzchak because he was looking for the merit of Yitzchak. As we just said, Yitzchak was, had exhibited such a strict adherence to the law and was very passive during the binding of Isaac. Or you could say that he was trying to bring some kind of a lesson from the way Yitzchak led his life, that his children and descendants should follow, because if they also could merit the same, if they could muster the same kind of self-sacrifice and adherence to the law, then chances are they wouldn't be swallowed up in Egypt, and there wouldn't be so much assimilation. So it could be that was what the Ramban meant when he said that he was praying to the God of Isaac. Another way to perhaps understand this mysterious Ramban is think of it as somebody whose son is in trouble with the law. And there's two ways he could appeal to the judge. He could either say to the judge, he's a really good boy, I'm going to bring all these character witnesses and show that even though he deserves some kind of punishment, he's such a good guy, he shouldn't get it. That would be appealing to Avram and Chesed. But instead, wouldn't it be even better if you can come to the judge and say, according to the law, he really doesn't deserve this punishment. I'm using your own law to prove that the punishment that you meted out is not the one that is appropriate. A far less punishment is in place. Explain that a little bit. There's a very strange Gemara in Shabbos that says that at some point God said to the three Avot, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that the Jewish people had sinned. And he first spoke to Avram and Yaakov, and he said the Jewish people have sinned terribly. And they both said, okay, it would be a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name, if they were punished for what they did. And even if that punishment meant that they had to be the end of the Jewish people, if you think that's what they deserve, so be it. You have a right to, God has a right to be as strict as necessary. But when it came to Yitzchak, and we said Yitzchak was the person of Din, strict justice, Yitzchak said, wait a second, within your own law, this is not the case. Because if you're saying how much sin did they do? How long did they sin? I mean, every day is taken up with other things, eating and sleeping and things like that. So now you're only talking about a few hours of sin. And then he ended up saying, and I'll take all that sin on my half, or maybe we'll split it between us. Don't forget, I sacrificed myself in the binding of Isaac. You owe me something for that. And so he was negotiating with God through the law itself and saying, you got to mitigate the law. So I've tried several different ways to try to explain the Ramban. And of course, the Ramban, as he says, is a sod, which means by definition, this is going to be something that we're never going to understand unless we're on the same level of understanding Kabbalah as the Ramban. And he often throws out this term that, this is a sod, and maybe Yavin, that those who understand will understand, and those who don't won't. So we're trying our best, and it's kind of an interesting foray into something that I've never experienced before, taking a very simple statement in the Midrash Rabbah that one has to fear their father, respect their father more than their grandfather, and taking that to some whole other place, which the Ramban does. And it's just interesting to see if we can unveil and unravel some other mysterious meaning that, of course, the Ramban sees very clearly in this. Have a great Shabbat.